This is Beyond the Sketch. I'm Brittany Harris. Today, I'm sitting down with a power couple you'll definitely want to know, Ema and James Roloff. Ema is one of the leading voices in digital transformation. She's interviewed over 300 experts, been named AI Journal's Young Tech Leader of the Year, and James has been building in the digital space since 2001. He's led sales teams, built strategies that actually work, and he's passionate about helping businesses succeed by educating and empowering their clients. Together, they've co-founded Roloff Consulting, and they're the team behind the Catalyst Group and the Ignite Conference. So without further ado, welcome Mr. and Mrs. Roloff to Beyond the Sketch.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I'm so happy to have you guys today. Before we dive in, I did want to start at the beginning for listeners who might be meeting you guys for the first time. So who is Ema Roloff? Who is James Roloff? And what perspective do you bring to this conversation?
My background is predominantly in software sales, but tied to a little bit of the educational sales tactics component that you brought up in light of James. I actually have a teaching background. So I went to school to be a social studies teacher, moved from teaching in a classroom to corporate training. And I always say from little people to big people, but essentially the same skill set there, and then made a little bit of a larger leap from corporate training into software sales, which is kind of where I found my groove. For about a decade, did enterprise software sales until I decided to come join Mr. Roloff in the consulting company.
And you forgot to mention, too, you worked at Culver's franchising. So for those of us in the Midwest, Brittany, where are you located? Are you in the Midwest or where are you at?
Think I'm considered the Midwest. I live in Louisville, Kentucky, but sometimes the true Midwest fights on if we're Midwest or not.
Okay.
But we do have Culver's.
Okay,
I was going to say,
you have Culver's.
So restaurants there.
That's the fun fact, too, is me and Emma both worked at Culver's for like 10-ish years, too. That's where our love truly blossomed. I was making butter burgers and custard.
For anybody who's questioning how you can run a business with your spouse, work in a fast food restaurant with them for that long, and that's way more stressful than running like a professional business together.
Wow.
Yes. But yeah, beyond making butter burgers, and working at Culver's, my background is really entrepreneurship and digital marketing. So previous business was a web design company. There was a family business. We sold that at the end of 2021. And since then, I've been doing consulting, helping teams with their sales and marketing strategy, really focused on digital content as a means of doing that.
Okay, well, now that we've kind of gotten past introductions, you've definitely taken my first question out of the way, which I was going to ask, how did you guys get married and fall in love? But now we know that there was a bond based in butter burgers. So can you tell me about how you guys started Catalyst?
Yes, so the Catalyst community is our group program. It's really peers of people who are in business development, entrepreneurs, people who are looking to grow their business through online content. And really the backbone of our philosophy about how we work is this concept where the best people who sell are teachers, or the best way to sell is to teach. We're big believers in creating content online, building an audience by providing value and turning that into trust, which is ultimately what turns into sales. So our Catalyst community is really a group, I would say a coaching program, but it's much more than that. It's much more of a community of peers, of people who are there to support each other, and they are there to create content to grow their business. So we're very proud of that. We've got 30 plus members now in the Catalyst community from different backgrounds, and it's definitely a fun spot to kind of see people go from being very cautious about doing anything at all to, starting to create content, creating podcasts, things like that. It's a lot of fun to watch people grow through that.
And what would you say was the gap that you saw in the industry that made you say that this needed to exist at all? So I've got to build this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So both James and I, again, having come with a background of sales and really implementing this favorite teacher framework that we consult on, both like in that group coaching in the Catalyst community or with our hands-on engagements with our customers. We were doing this framework when we were selling. But the idea of like social selling and cold calling is dead was like this idea that was like circulating, but there was still a lot of skepticism around it when we were both in our heyday of sales, and a lot of people that like questioned the approach of a digital strategy. Now, that's not me saying that like cold calling is dead and there's no like value in traditional sales tactics, but doing it differently was something that both of us were really passionate about while we were selling. And we both hit our fair amount of like, this is kind of lonely when no one gets what you're doing. And specifically for me, like doing things drastically different than most of what I was being trained on was business development was at risk. And it felt like I was kind of going out on a limb. And then when things started to click and it was like, when you trust the process, look what happens. It's nice to have other people around you that are moving through that same process, that are interested in doing business development in a different way and interested in pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone. But going through that process of trusting it sometimes is lonely and sometimes is scary. So it's nice to have a group of people around you that can give you feedback on your content, that understand exactly why you're taking the approach that you are and are there to help you keep consistent and there to help you come up with new ideas and talk through the bumps that come up as you're going through this process. And so that was really for both of us. We were like, okay, we were a little bit out on an island. Thankfully, we had each other and our conversations at home to like work through this strategy. But there's a lot of people out there that are individual entrepreneurs or executives that want to try something different, and the rest of the team is a little skeptical. So we wanted to create a place where people could come together and really like work with their peers to execute on this strategy.
So speaking of people being a little skeptical, when I looked you guys up online, I saw a lot about digital transformation, and that I guess there can be challenges when going through a transformation. So what would you say is your definition of a digital transformation? And then what are the most common challenges that you see when someone's looking to transform?
Digital transformation idea is a massive topic that most people traditionally go to is using technology to enable different processes within my company. That's kind of like the baseline, whether that's enabling people or process within your company using technology to do that. What I sold when I was selling technology was the technology to enable all sorts of processes like on the back end of companies, whether that's like claims processing or being able to do accounts payable more effectively. And so I was involved in like much more of the traditional digital transformation sphere. My goodness. But now when I look at what we do, we're helping companies move through that process and more on the people and process side than the actual technology tools within their sales and marketing process. So when you look at like a digital sales strategy, we're talking about how do you use all the technology that's been at your disposal for quite some time to change the way that you educate. So we're enabling education through a digital strategy. And so it is a little bit of I would say, a slightly different definition than what it used to be at the beginning of my career, but it still fits into the same category of businesses have to shift and change as technology comes in. And oftentimes it's less about the tools that you're using and more about the mindset and the way that you're going about it to actually drive results.
Yeah, I'll jump in too and just say a lot of the transformation on our side of things is on the sales side and the consumer behavior side, meaning people don't buy the way they used to. People have now gotten used to going online, looking at vendors, and by the time they talk to a salesperson, they've vetted out who they want to work with. Like a lot of times it's like checking the boxes by the time they actually make contact with you. So it's a huge change in the way people buy. And people need to change the way they sell. That's why the old school tactics don't work as well as they used to, is because people don't want to be harassed. Like no one wants a salesperson calling their cell phone number anymore. Like that makes you upset. Like no one wants a cold email, right? So what you need to do is actually be the one who's out there that when someone's researching, they find your content. They find you to be a valuable teacher. And so when it comes time to vet which vendors they might want to work with and pick a certain solution, they already have you at the top of the list. They just need to make sure that, contractually, all that kind of stuff, it makes sense from a scoping perspective. So that's really the transformation from a sales perspective is that technology and the internet has drastically changed the way people buy. So a lot of our coaching and consulting comes down to helping businesses adapt to that and actually sell the way that people want to buy.
You kind of touched on some of this in your response, but for anyone listening that kind of feels overwhelmed by the pace of technology and the rate of change, what are some tips or some tools that you guys have that they can utilize where they can start experimenting with new technologies and not get left behind, so to speak?
Yeah, so I'll start. I know Emma's got a lot to say on this topic because she gives keynotes on this all the time. So, but from my perspective, the rate of change is getting faster and faster, and you need to not try to be responsive to it. You need to be proactive in the way that you are handling change management and the way you are handling the world changing around us. And we were talking about this just the other day. If you are trying to basically keep up, you are going to fall behind. And if your way of managing change is to look at the shiny hot thing that's in front of everybody and say, I want that, that's not going to help you either. Because again, by the time you implement it, it's not going to be effective anymore. So from a baseline perspective, again, I'm just speaking more from a sales and marketing perspective, and Emma can speak more on general technology too. But from a sales and marketing perspective, I think the key really is understand your core business, who you are, what you do, who you do it for, why it matters, have a true vision of where you want to be in the marketplace, and then look out and say, okay, what's changing, what's happening, how can we continue our vision in this current environment and where things are going. So basically start internally as far as like, who am I serving? What am I doing for them? And then leverage technology as much as possible. So from a sales and marketing perspective, continuing to experiment with new technology, making sure you're not falling behind as far as like what's actually effective. But again, you can use all the AI tools in the world, but if you're not talking to the right customer or you're not correctly positioning your business, it's not going to matter. So that's where I think it all starts, is that you can't really just keep up with change. You have to really know who you are and your business as itself, and then work from there. But again, I know Emma's got a lot more to say on that.
He's been listening to my keynotes. I think obviously we share a philosophy on many, if not all of the things that we're talking about today in terms of approaching new technology, approaching shiny object chasing and those types of things that James just talked about. The other piece that I would put out there is don't try to learn everything all at once. Make it your goal to build habits of how to learn about technology, little bits and pieces at a time. James can attest to the fact that like when I started in the software space, the amount of things that I didn't understand felt overwhelming. There might have been a time or two where I came home and was like, everyone's speaking a foreign language and was like overwhelmed and borderline crying because it felt like so much. But when you like take a step back and you realize like things are changing quickly, but trying to drink from a fire hose isn't going to do you any good, you're already at a better spot. You can take a step back and think, okay, if I don't understand the world of AI, what's the foundation that I need to build before I go to the next level? And how do I start like kind of step by step learning what I need to till suddenly this doesn't feel like a fire hose and it feels like a water fountain. And like James laughs at all of my analogies, so I'm going to pull another analogy out. Like I like to think of learning something new as like a video game. When you start the video game, you're learning the rules, you're learning how a bad guy can kill you, you're learning like how you can defend yourself against it. And as you continue on level to level, you get better and the challenges get harder. But especially with something like technology or building a digital strategy, you have to start at the beginning and building that foundation. So James talked about like you need the foundation of who you are and what your vision of your company is going to be before you start chasing any shiny object, because you don't know where it's going to come into your strategy. Or if you want to understand AI, you can't get to the point where you understand what neural networks are if you don't even know what AI stands for. So like starting with foundational knowledge and building it as you go and not trying to learn everything all at once, I think is one of the most important things for people as they're approaching technology, as they're approaching building a digital strategy. James can attest to the fact that when I started creating content again, it wasn't like I all of a sudden was, and I'm certainly not like millions and millions of followers content wise, but it's not like all of a sudden I was like a influence overnight. Sometimes that happens to people, but like it was, oh, how do I film a video and like add graphics to it? And that was like where I learned, and that's what I started with. And then it became, how do I engage other people to be a part of this? How do I do this next level? Or, so it's step by step as opposed to trying to overwhelm yourself by learning everything.
And speaking on foundations, we've all kind of lived through the evolution of marketing from the early digital eras to today. So when you guys look at the way companies tell their stories now, what has changed the most, but what from the good old days still holds true?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the what's changed has been, again, how people buy is a big one, right? The way in which customers get exposed to your business has changed drastically. And it went from just being in-person events and cold calling and yellow pages. My family's previous business was actually a commercial printing company. So, getting postcards in the mail and all of that. And there was still a relevancy for some of that stuff too, I should say. But that was the initial part of it. Then you had your company websites. Then you had platforms, things like Facebook, people were being found on, things like SEO, so getting found on Google. And now we're entering this new world where even those platforms aren't where people find you. They're going to find you through AI chat and things like that. So there's continually been a way of change as far as the means of getting your marketing message out there. But again, I think what hasn't changed is that you have to know who you are as a brand. You have to tell your story as a brand in a way that's compelling. And I'm a huge fan of Donald Miller and story brand and that whole concept of making your customer the hero of their story. And you're kind of that guide, that, Yoda to Luke Skywalker as far as how you position your brand. But again, you look at how successful brands are, the ones that are compellingly telling their story of how they serve their customers. Those ones will do well as long as they're staying relevant on the right platforms over time. So that's probably the way I see it as far as what changed and what hasn't changed. And I'll say too, the brands that tend to do well are the ones that are willing to try new things and just do things. And I see this again and again in working with clients that some have a very static mindset of this is what we do, this is how we've always done it, and they're very adverse to trying something new and change. And we have some that are willing to constantly try new things, and there's not, there's concern and there's fear of obviously trying new things, but they realize that that's how you grow, and they have that growth mindset. That's a big thing I'd say in the process too, is that the companies that can really truly embrace that growth mindset, they're the ones who are going to be successful going forward.
Would agree with James, especially along that idea of like taking action in a world that's like absolutely full of constant noise. If all you're doing is the exact same thing, you become the noise that's drowned out in the background. So I think like taking action, trying new things is really important. But one other thing that I would say I think has changed pretty drastically over the last like 5 years, even post-COVID, is this like thirst for authenticity and a thirst for whether it's a brand or personal brands associated with a company, feeling like they are driven by people, specifically because the world that we live in has had pretty substantial changes, and there's different viewpoints of how much you can trust a company or an entity that doesn't feel human and connect with you. And so whether it is your company brand or your personal brand, and like many more companies are leaning towards like executives and leadership using their personal brand as an asset for the company, it's because people want to actually connect with people. And so the more that you can tell that story and allow people to connect with actual people in your company that are going to be that Yoda or that, like that guide for them, the better you're going to do, because there is inherent trust that comes with feeling a connection to other human beings. And if all you do is the same old polished Instagram feed with like graphics that all feel the same and things that are all approved by 15 different departments in your company to put out onto social media, that's when you're going to become that noise in the background that no one pays attention to. So you have to be willing to like try things and be human and like show up as a real person if you want to stand out.
Okay. And early in my sales career, I had a mentor that once told me that you have to answer the questions before they're asked of you in regards to sales. So with you guys being the professionals that you are, I have to say you are answering my questions before I get to them. So I wanted to ask you, like, what's one, whether it's a sales or a marketing mistake that you guys see over and over that you would say, hey, salesperson, stop making this mistake. And you just gave us a list of mistakes, but are there any other that you see that's just like, hey, cut this out?
The other big thing that pops out really intensely to me is that, like, again, I mentioned the idea of social selling with quotes earlier. Social and your personal brand should be about educating your customer, not about selling a product. And typically, salespeople are experts in their product, but also much of what else surrounds their product, their industry. There's conversations and things that you can be doing that add value to your customers without being like, oh, and by the way, here's the widget that we sell, or here's the service that we have. If you are providing value and education, yes, you do need to have clear calls to action and clear ways for people to understand how to work with you, how to get a hold of you. But when someone trusts you, even if they don't know fully that you can solve their problem, they're going to reach out to you to see who can. And more often than not, you're going to have an opportunity to help them or continue to build trust by pointing them in the right direction. And so too often, what I see is people posting content that all feels like it's selling and all feels product heavy, as opposed to, again, being a real person with nuance and understanding and ideas that come beyond just what their product is.
I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to give two mistakes that I see very commonly in the sales world. Number one is talking too much and not listening enough. I think people who listen and ask questions to their prospects will be far more successful than those that feel like they need to be doing selling and talking at them. Listening, number one, makes your prospects feel heard, and people like to talk. Here I am talking right now, so I'm falling into that boat. And it also gives you incredible insights. If you're able to actually just shut up and let your prospect talk, they will tell you what they need to be told to get sold to. They will share their pain points and all that. So number one is just listening more than talking. And then number two, which we've already touched on a little bit, is not taking action. But that's probably one of the biggest things. Sales, marketing, entrepreneurship, whatever. You learn by taking action, not by thinking about it forever. You will make mistakes, and you will have a bad social media post, or you'll mess up different random things. But if you don't do it, you'll never learn. You'll never learn how to improve it next time, right? And that's by far one of the biggest like differentiators I can see between our most successful clients or people in our community versus those who are not as successful, is the ones who just fail to take action because they feel like they're not good enough yet, or they don't have all the information yet, or whatever. If you don't take the action, you're not going to get any results at all. So that's probably that's probably honestly the biggest mistake I see.
That's definitely some good information and good things that we can all, look out for. So kind of switching gears, if we were to go into what we're calling our versus round, I'll throw out a series of matchups like this versus that, and I want to hear where you guys land. I know Emma told me earlier you guys tend to agree, so we'll see here.
Not necessarily in this type of environment, on our philosophy of our business, yes, but maybe not in this scenario.
But there's no right or wrong answers, but I may ask you to expound. So first up, we've got LinkedIn video versus TikTok.
TikTok.
I'm not even on TikTok, so I have to say LinkedIn video, but Emma might be right here.
ChatGPT versus Google search.
I use Google search still for majority of things when it comes to like seeking information, but I'm slowly starting to use ChatGPT as a bit of a search engine too.
I still go towards search unless I'm looking for something very specific and I want help hunting and pecking.
So that leads me right into AI. So AI replacing jobs versus employees learning to use AI.
I'm fully in the camp that AI is not going to be replacing mass amounts of jobs, but it'll be just transforming the way we work. and it'll spur just as many new jobs, if not more, is my thought process on it.
Make a lot of people angry on the internet by saying that it's not going to steal your job, but it's going to change it. And so like stand behind that statement.
Attending live conferences versus attending that conference remotely.
I absolutely hate remote conferences. I'm a huge fan of like watching webinars and things like that, but like I'm not going to sit at my computer all day long and look at live streams. So that's my take. I love in-person events for that kind of thing.
Me too. Meant to be remote and everyone's remote. I'm good. I'll interact with the chat and that kind of thing. But I do feel like there's something missing if everyone else is in person and I'm not there. James knows I have really bad FOMO. So
what about personal brand versus educational brand? And I can expound if I need to.
Yeah, maybe I'm curious what your expounding is.
So
there.
My take on this, personal brand is more promoting yourself. Even if you went to a different company, you may take your following with you to that company. I see educational brand as probably more so company-based and putting out information, as Emma mentioned earlier, where you can point someone in the right direction or give them more information about the industry as a whole.
Okay, so I'm going to cheat then, and I'm going to say your personal brand should be educational, and that you as a person should be sharing personal content, but also educating, and which will help your company. Oftentimes we hear the question, should I focus on my personal brand or my company brand? And I know companies feel that way about sometimes their employees doing things too. And the analogy I always use is sports teams. You know, you had Michael Jordan. He was a star, but he played for the Chicago Bulls, along with, you know, Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen and all those guys. And a good sports team is going to have some good players on it. And their personal brands are going to help the company brand and vice versa. So I don't see them as two opposing things. I think that it's a good thing for people, you know, and every employee, especially anyone customer facing, should have a personal brand, but it should also support the company brand and vice versa.
Agree. I would say I'm a pretty strong example of how your personal brand should be educational, how it can travel with you, but also massively benefit the company. Most of my content when I was selling was my personal content, but it led to some of the biggest deals that our company had ever seen. And that obviously benefited the company, but the trust that I as an individual built by educating people came with me as I moved on. And one thing just to touch on here, because this is like a soapbox of mine that James kind of set up. If you are a company who is afraid of letting people build a personal brand because you're afraid that they're going to take it somewhere else, that is such a short-sighted thought. And you should be focused, instead of stopping that personal brand from taking root, on what you need to do to keep that employee and keep them happy. Because you will not grow as a company if you don't have people that are willing to take action, who are willing to go out there, who are willing to take a chance. And specifically, business development people, executives who are out there representing your company, trying to build and grow your company. Their job is to take risks and to be out there and to do that. And there is a risk and a reward that comes with that. And as a company, you need to be able to invest in that person and keep them happy so that they can go out and take those risks and represent your company the right way and help you grow your company. And if you're so focused on how do I make sure no one sees my shining star, you have a really short-sighted viewpoint and that person will leave you and you will cause what you're trying to avoid by keeping them from building a brand.
Mic drop. So I do want to get back to the work that you guys are doing right now. I know that you have the Ignite conference coming up, which should be just around the corner. So number one, when is this event and what will listeners walk away with that could change their careers or their businesses if they attend?
Yeah, so the summit is on November 13th. It's in Madison, Wisconsin, and it's really focused on digital leadership. So a lot of the topics we're talking about today, we have a great panel of speakers. We have people who are executives, entrepreneurs in tech, in insurance, in law, a couple of different industries represented, but really people who are doing what we're talking about today, people who are creating content, educating their audience, building a following of people who are attracted to them and trust them at scale. And using that to grow their business. So that's really the root of what we're talking about at the conference, as well as disruptive mindset too, and like change management, what it means to lead in a digital world. So we're looking to bring in executives and entrepreneurs and business leaders who are truly trying to adapt this mindset and trying to learn how to grow their business in the digital world, trying to bring them in, teach them, give them some insights, and have some good networking too.
So for those who are ready to get involved, what's the best way to join the Catalyst group? Where do they find the Catalyst group? And then how can they attend the Ignite conference? Are there still any tickets left?
So RoloffConsulting.com, if you go to our website, community center of the website on the top, you can click on that. That'll bring you to all of the information about the Catalyst community, what it entails, how to join. Everything is right there on that landing page for you. For the community members that are a part of the Catalyst community, they get a discount for ticket to join us for the Ignite conference. So if you join the community, there's the added benefit of a pretty significantly discounted code to join us here in Madison for that event. Otherwise, if you don't want to join the community, you want to come try things out, test the waters in person, and then join the community, you can go to ignitedigitalleadershipsummit.com. It's a mouthful, but it's also very straightforward. And all of the details about the conference, registration, and where the event is going to take place are on that website. Once you register, you'll get an email with more information about like room block for a hotel and everything else from that standpoint that everybody who frequents events is familiar with. But I think it's, again, the idea here is that people that are a part of the Catalyst community already are invested in these ideas. And again, this idea of taking action and really like igniting the spark that comes with that. So we want to make sure that we can get as many of them there for a meetup as possible, but the conference is open to whoever would like to join us.
As we conclude, the last question that I have for both Ema and James, imagine you could put one message on a billboard that every sales professional or insurance professional in the digital world would see tomorrow morning. What would your message be and why? Take it away.
It would be take action and stay consistent. Those
Love
are the
it.
two things that you need to do in sales. And I think in general in life, like anything you want to accomplish, you want to get in shape, you start taking action and you stay consistent with it. You want to eat healthy, you start eating healthy and you stay consistent with it. You want to raise a good kid, you take action on like disciplining them and like raising them with your values and you stay consistent with those values. Like, I think that that's just generally kind of the philosophy that we live by in this house.
Yeah, and mine is very similar. And it was actually a quote from an author called Sahil Lavinga. I can't pronounce his last name. He wrote the book called The Minimalist Entrepreneur. But in it, he kind of referenced, and it's very similar to Emma's, is that you don't learn and then start. You start and then learn. So the best way to learn and grow is just to get started. And that'd be the simple quote I would share.
Well, that was Ema and James Roloff. If you connected with their vision today, the best way to go deeper is to follow what they're doing at Roloff Consulting. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Sketch. If this episode sparked or ignited something for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.